Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never thought a single text could erase 15 years of marriage. I thought we had stability, routine, maybe even love in our quiet way. I'm Marcus, 46, and I thought Evelyn and I had built something unbreakable. At least until the day the lawyers came into the picture. Evelyn, my wife, my partner, the woman I thought I knew, decided that what we had wasn't enough, that it was over. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me with the silence of a house that had once been alive with laughter, arguments, and small victories. It started months before the official split. The signs were subtle at first, small frustrations over bills, offhand comments about personal space, and a growing distance in our evenings. I'd come home from work, hoping to find her curled up with a book or smiling over dinner, but the smiles were gone. The conversations that had once flowed freely were replaced by monosyllabic responses. Even the shared glances, the ones that had said, without words, "I'm glad you're here," had disappeared. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe I was overthinking. After all, life isn't always sparkly. Work stress, aging, responsibilities. I kept telling myself these were temporary. But there were moments I couldn't ignore. The night she left the house for a girls' dinner and returned 3 hours later, brushing past me without a word. The weekends that were once ours, filled with small adventures, suddenly felt like solitary excursions I took alone. And when I finally asked, gently, what was happening between us, she would just shrug and say, "I need time," as if my presence had become a burden. I remember the day the divorce papers arrived. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation. Just an envelope on the kitchen counter, her handwriting familiar yet distant, and inside, a formal request that I sign, stating all assets were to be divided according to her proposed terms. I stared at it for what felt like hours, each line cutting deeper than the last. Evelyn had taken everything, the house, the cars, the savings, the retirement funds. Everything. At first, I was in disbelief. How could someone take everything we built together and still feel entitled to more? I went over the papers again and again, hoping to find a mistake, a line that would give me leverage. But she had been meticulous. Every asset was listed, every account accounted for. And yet, deep down, I realized she didn't understand what she had truly taken. She took the possessions, yes, but she underestimated the things that couldn't be touched. My dignity, my composure, the quiet strength I had honed over 15 years of partnership. There's a peculiar kind of clarity that comes when someone tries to strip you down to nothing. In the silence of that empty living room, I could feel it. The calm beneath the hurt, the steadiness beneath the betrayal. I thought about the countless mornings I had woken early to make coffee, the nights I stayed up fixing the leaky sink, the weekends I spent mowing the lawn while she relaxed. She had measured everything in dollars and titles, but she had overlooked the intangible, the unwavering patience, the emotional labor, the respect that had defined my role as a husband. I walked through the house one last time, touching objects that had once held memories. The couch where we had argued over silly things, the kitchen table that had witnessed quiet celebrations of birthdays and promotions, the little corner where I used to read while she painted. These were reminders that life isn't measured only in material possessions. And in that moment, I realized that while Evelyn could take all the things, she could never take the self-respect I had cultivated, the inner fortitude that had carried me through the hardest years. It was also the moment I decided something else. I wouldn't let bitterness rule me. I wouldn't allow the loss to define the rest of my life. Instead, I chose to see it as an opportunity to reclaim parts of myself that had quietly eroded over the years, to reconnect with the passions I had neglected, the friendships I had set aside, the small joys that had once seemed insignificant but were now vital. If this story resonates with you, and you believe others should hear it too, please don't forget to like and share so this message reaches those who might need it. The first few days were strange. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so, and I found myself waking in the mornings without the usual routine of her presence beside me. I didn't feel anger at first, just a peculiar numbness. But then, little by little, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The sunlight hitting the living room window in a certain way, the sound of birds outside, the aroma of coffee brewing in the kitchen. The world, I realized, continued even after she had taken everything. And in that, there was a fragile but growing sense of freedom. As the days turned into weeks, I began to understand the subtle ways in which Evelyn had underestimated me. She believed that by taking everything, she had won. But what she didn't see was the quiet resilience that had always been part of me. I started small, reclaiming routines I had abandoned, indulging in hobbies I'd set aside, reconnecting with friends who had drifted away. Each step was a small victory, a reminder that life could continue, and even flourish, without her presence dictating every move. There was a moment one afternoon that crystallized everything for me. I sat in the empty dining room, sipping coffee, when a thought struck me. Evelyn had focused entirely on possessions, not realizing that the real wealth, the patience, the loyalty, the integrity that I carried, was something no one could take. And in that thought, I found both sorrow and liberation. I felt a pang for the years lost to misunderstanding and emotional distance, but I also felt the exhilarating clarity of freedom. Of course, not all moments were calm. There were calls from her lawyer, formal requests, and the occasional awkward run-ins that reminded me of the conflict's lingering presence. Each time, I responded with measured clarity, refusing to let anger dictate my actions. I realized that dignity, once lost to bitterness, is nearly impossible to regain. But if preserved, it can guide you through even the most tumultuous storms. One evening, while sorting through old boxes, I found a photograph of us on a rainy morning at the beach. We were laughing, soaked to the bone, completely unself-conscious. I held it for a long time, letting memories wash over me. And then I made a decision. I wouldn't let resentment anchor me to the past. I would take the lessons, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and transform them into a foundation for the next chapter of my life. It was around that time I realized how much I needed the support of others. I reached out to old friends, sharing parts of the story I had kept buried. The response was overwhelming. Not just empathy, but wisdom, humor, and shared experiences that reminded me I was not alone. I want to hear from you too. Comment below and share a time you had to rebuild yourself after losing something important. Let's start a conversation about strength, resilience, and reclaiming life. With each passing day, the house became less a monument to what I had lost and more a canvas for what I could create. I painted the walls, rearranged furniture, and even planted flowers in the backyard. Small acts that symbolized control over my environment, over the life that remained mine. I discovered that freedom isn't just the absence of someone else. It's the presence of your own choices, your own priorities, your own voice. I also began to notice subtle changes in the way people around me responded. Friends who had remained distant now sought connection. Colleagues who had underestimated my emotional stability now treated me with a quiet respect. It was as if, by weathering the storm with calm and dignity, I had demonstrated an unspoken authority. Evelyn had taken the material, but she could never touch that. Then came the day when I realized something extraordinary. The divorce, with all its loss, had sparked a transformation I hadn't anticipated. I felt lighter, more attuned to my emotions, and more confident in my choices. I recognized patterns in my past relationships, habits I needed to change, and boundaries I needed to enforce. And most importantly, I understood that self-respect is not something that can be handed over or taken away. It is earned and maintained, even in the face of betrayal. There were moments when I missed her, the presence, the familiarity, the imagined what-ifs. But each time, I reminded myself that longing is different from surrender. Longing acknowledges what was, but it does not erase the clarity of what is. Evelyn had taken what she valued, but she could not grasp what I had cultivated for myself. Autonomy, strength, and the courage to embrace life on my own terms. By the third month, I had started volunteering at a local community center and reconnecting with hobbies that had always been quietly waiting: photography, hiking, and writing. Life, in its subtle persistence, moved forward. And with it, I discovered an empowering truth. Sometimes, Losing everything material forces you to find everything that truly matters. It was at that point I realized the full lesson of what had happened. The divorce was not an end. It was a mirror, showing me the depth of my own resilience. If you've ever faced loss that seemed unbearable, take a moment to reflect. What have you truly gained in the process? Comment your thoughts below. Let's discuss the ways hardship can shape strength. The final pieces fell into place when I reconnected with my professional aspirations, diving into projects I had set aside for the marriage's comfort. I realized that by focusing on growth, not revenge, I had reclaimed not only my life but my spirit. The weight of resentment lifted, replaced with clarity, purpose, and hope. If you're finding value in this story and want to continue seeing these reflections and real-life lessons, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss stories that empower and inspire. In the end, Evelyn took what she thought she wanted, but she missed the most essential pieces: the strength, the clarity, the life I had nurtured within myself. And in that, I found not anger, but freedom. Freedom not from her, but for me, from doubt, from dependency, from the invisible chains of expectation. And for the first time in years, I could breathe, fully and without reservation, ready to live a life defined not by loss, but by choice, resilience, and the quiet power of self-respect.